Welcome to the hybrid evolution talk, and tonight through the talk you can discover if you are an hybrid or not, and what does that do for you in your life. So, if you're asking yourself whether you have the picture of my book here, because if you look closely, and you can find it online at Amazon, it's that I am an hybrid, and therefore the picture is me and my hybrid melded together. It's pretty cool. Now, how do you know if you are an hybrid for yourself? So before you listen to a 90-minute talk and say, this was useless to me, if you answer yes to any of those questions, then you probably are a type of hybrid. Now, there's multiple types, and we'll try and cover as many as we can tonight, but I will not cover everything. I'll cover as many as we can. You often feel like you don't fit in. You often feel like you're on the fringe of society. There's something not necessarily wrong with you, but you can't seem to fit in no matter what it is that you do. You're hypersensitive to violence, whether it is in movies or in comics, or it's just not your thing. You're deeply committed to helping the earth or the people of the earth. So it's not necessarily like cleaning the earth thing, but you're very concerned on a more community scale or country scale. And you often would describe yourself as an independent thinker, and you usually would follow your inner guidance about what's right, and you like going against the norm. So hybrids tend to like to they tend to be innovative. They tend to create new ways of doing things because they go against the norm. So they're usually the one who will take a step back and say, well, yes, we've been doing it this way for 100 years, but there's this way we could do it, or there's that we could do instead. Like, forget all this, let's just do this instead. So they play an important role, but depending on which hybrid you are and when into the human evolution you kind of enter, then it plays on which aspect you're here to learn about yourself and for your group as well. Before a hybrid person can enter human evolution, they have to meet with the karmic board. They have to be ready. So even though it's usually very, very difficult for hybrids to be in a human evolution, it's essential for them to be extremely strong as their other self before they can come in. And that's usually true of earth elementals. And you'll see there's space elementals, there's very, very old beings that enter the earth, and so we have different types. But for the earth elementals, the ones that were evolving with humans in a slightly different dimension than we are, then that's the process that they have to follow. In one family, usually, if you're an hybrid, then there are other hybrids in the same family. It's not something that you're unique in your family. Usually one of the parents will be a type of hybrids, and it will get passed down because they'll bring a certain frequency that would allow the soul of a hybrid to come into the evolution. And so does that mean that the dad's angel hybrids, the kids an angel hybrid? No. There can be several different types of hybrids. It's just the frequency being higher usually will allow for this to be introduced into the family. Now, if you are an originally star being, which we'll discuss, then you may enter, or you may have more than one hybrid evolution, because the stars beings did come in at first to help us humans evolve. And then as they contributed and helped us, then certain beings could no longer tolerate the density of the planet to remain in their original forms, and they had to integrate the human evolution to continue teaching us and being there with us. And then they usually tended to the other non-human forms of evolution, and then reintegrated eventually the human evolution, because that's who needs the most help. Dolphins are doing pretty good on their own if we wouldn't pollute the ocean. Orcas are doing pretty good on their own if we wouldn't mess it up. So therefore, they seem to have now all converged throughout time to humanity, to help humanity be aware that they're not the only people on the planet. Well, people maybe, but not the only living sentient beings on the planet. So, in the great beginning, so you understand how this all works, we have to go back, way, way back. As we're going back, we go back to this one consciousness, this one mighty, powerful being, that all of a sudden became conscious and aware that he was alone. And this loneliness weighed on him so much that he created the ether light, or the word, and created matter out of just space, or what's called the void. Now this isn't, for those of you out there thinking that this is a religious speech, it's not, because this is in all of the different cultures around the world. There's a beginning in every culture, and the beginning's always the same. There was always a consciousness, a thought, and out of this thought came matter. And out of this matter came gaseous forms that created planets, and created the cosmos. And so it goes back to also rejoining with science when they said there was a big bang. There's a big evolutionary moment for this being, and it created the entire cosmos. So out of this, individual souls were created in the trillions. Okay, so we have millions, billions, and then it's trillions. Okay, and it's trillions with an S. So there were many, 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 many souls created all at once. In the divine state of being born of light. Alright? So the form was light. When we say that we were created in the image of our Creator, Creator was light. And so our true nature and form is light. The physical form that we occupy now is a physical body, looks human. But our light essence is the same as it is in a dolphin, or as it is in an orca, or as it is, it's the soul. And these trillions of souls spread out to the entire universe. And when that happened, in this expansion, some of us were sent to the Pleiades, some of us got sent to Venus, and some of us got sent to different planets and different solar systems, not just ours. And as it is on other planets still, as it was on Earth, is that at first we were in a very gaseous form. We weren't as dense as we are now. So as the planet evolved and the planet became denser, we became denser. Some evolved faster spiritually than others. Now, it's not because we're stupid. It's just because some other planet evolved people came here and messed with our evolution, which actually set us back. And that's what we're fighting to get back at. So it's the same idea as, you know, the kid growing up, and you look at a kid and you say, you're so dumb, you'll never amount to anything, and you think, oh, it's nothing. And it has a ripple effect of this being repeated in their heads forever. And this, until they get rid of it, becomes their sabotage in everything that they do, because they never believe that. They believe that, and they don't believe anything else. For me, it was a teacher who told me, you can't sing, you should never sing. Shut up. And I didn't question it, because it came from a form of authority. He was leading a choir, and it was like, oh, okay, well, so much for that. And I walked away from it. And I didn't sing for years until, you know, I'm somewhere and I'm singing, and someone actually approached me to join their choir. Like, you've got to be crazy. Like, do you need people that bad that, you know, you want me to come and join the singing? And they're like, no, you have a beautiful voice. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I can't sing. So they're like, no, you can't sing soprano, but you're a tenor, so you can totally sing, and we would really like you in the choir. I was like, oh, right. But for the past 15 years, I believed this one statement that was said to me, and I didn't double check, and I just took it for granted. They must know what they're talking about, and therefore I should just shut up like they want me to shut up. Right? So this is the same kind of thing. They interfered, maybe sometimes well-intended, but they interfered with our evolution. However, amongst the souls that were called to help us out were angels. So we'll start with the angels. The angels evolved from the beginning of the history. They've been recorded in cultures such as Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Zoroastrianism. Okay, I get $20 for that one. Angels will have different names, but it doesn't matter. They're all defined the same way. They're helpers, they're messengers. They come and they have, depending on which order they're from, bear different qualities. The ones that we're interested in were the ones that were in charge of gifting humanity with healing, hope, patience, forgiveness, and assistance whenever asked. Which means that these earth angels were working 24/7, and they didn't live in our time and space, so they could be called in different places. Now, can we think of specific angels that would be called by different people all over the planet? Anybody? Michael is one of them, yes. Raphael. And so these beings are used to being called, and when they're being called, they appear and go yes. And they're waiting for us to say, I need help with this, or can you give me guidance on that? And that is their role. The angels do not have free will, and so therefore they don't have a boss. Their boss is God. And their boss said, this is your will. And they don't question it, and they're happy to serve, because they don't have free will anyway, so it's not that they could rebel. But they find their joy and their peace in fulfilling their role. Right? But the difference between humans and all the other creatures is that all the other creatures actually know what they're supposed to be doing. Makes it a lot easier to be happy to do what you're supposed to be doing when someone actually tells you this is what you're supposed to be doing, this is what you're created for, this is what you're made for. As opposed to us humans, we have free will, we can do whatever we want, but that doesn't help us whatsoever in finding what we're actually supposed to be doing. Hence why we're so miserable at times. Not because we can't do what we're supposed to do, we just have to figure it out first. Now, the free will was given to humans by God, and it is his greatest gift to us, because he's allowing us to grow. But like a good parent, doesn't always approve of what we're doing, but has to let us learn our lesson. Otherwise, he would be pulling away free will. So when you're putting a child in a corner, and you're putting this invisible bubble and say, don't move, you're taking their free will away for a few minutes. Yeah? God doesn't want to do that. So why do bad things happen? Because humans choose to do bad things. And why does God let bad things happen? Because it's part of our evolution. It's part of our learning. And as well, one of the greatest lessons that we need to learn is compassion and forgiveness. And we all agree as souls before we come to earth on what we will live through in this life to learn about forgiveness in this life and to learn about compassion in this life. That we learn compassion from rescuing a dog who's sick and injured, or that we learn compassion from seeing a show on TV with people that don't have water and we start digging wells for them. It doesn't really matter. But compassion, in order to be expressed, has to be expressed in the face of suffering. And we all take turns, lifetime after lifetime. It's not always the same ones that keeps on suffering and always the same one that keeps on being rich. And we take turns so that we can all learn and evolve. Now, humans were here in doing that, learning the laws of the universe, which will be another talk. They were given the power to create. But we do have power to create. Our power has been greatly diminished. But we do create food, we do create gardens, we do create paintings, we're still creating. But back then, we had the power to actually create and manifest out of thin air into something that had form and shape. And we got so full of ourselves, we thought we were better than actual creators. And so we got taken down a notch. And we got moved closer to the actual denser dimension. And as we did that, that is what's called the original fall from grace, because we got cut off from Creator. We knew what our purpose was then, and then if you can't use your purpose the way it was intended, let's see you work and discover your purpose, and by the time you will have learned it, you will use it properly. And so in each case, the soul's task was to remember its own divine nature and to learn to return to it. That is why you're here. The angel hybrid at one point looked at were earthlings, and because they became denser, they were disconnected, and so they couldn't really say, hey, can you come and help? Right? Because they can't see them anymore. And so they were losing this. So the angels volunteered to enter the actual human body to help humans in their physical form. However, it came with challenges. The angels are learning of free will while they're in human body, which is the only way they will ever learn about free will. They are selfless in their dedication to others. And they will usually have a hard time saying no. They will be always helping. They will be the ones that fall to sleep as much as they need or eat as much as they need because they give of each other, themselves so much. And they have to learn that they're now in a physical dimension with time and space. So they need sleep and they need rest. And it's okay. It's not selfish to spend time on themselves, on their goals or their own pursuits, while they're dedicating most of their time to helping others. Through this process, the angelic human hybrid, tend to work with emotions, feelings, and devotions. So those are the profession that they tend to go towards to. Jesus was the angelic descent because he was teaching about love. And we'll see after that Buddha was came from a mental race, not an angelic race. And so he was teaching from a mental standpoint. So if you are an angel being or an angel hybrid, you should keep realistic goals and expectations because you are human now. You have to forgive yourself for your sins of omission, so admitting to do something to help someone, or your sin of commission because you think you've done something bad. You need to forgive yourself for that. And you feel sometimes a lot more disconnected from Source, or the importance to stay connected is much more important to you, and you must honor that for yourself, which means sometimes that you have to practice meditation and pray more than the next person. You have to trust your inner guidance and your intuition. It is very strong within you, but you are losing this trust because it's not so clear in this physical body. So there's an inane doubt that you possess as you're working with this. But you must find whatever spiritual practice you connect with that will strengthen that connection to Source and to your inner self and your connection of intuition. So after this is happening, other places are evolving, and because they're evolving simultaneously in neighboring galaxies and things, some develop their spirituality faster or to a higher degree than us. And they were good intentions, seeking out to carry God's will, and they came to observe Earth. Why are they struggling so much? And they decided that they should help us speed the process along. So when you look at mythology and you see the god Thoth came, it's a bird being. We're going to talk about bird hybrid. They can't be more bird hybrid than that. It has the head of a bird and the body of a human. Thoth came and taught education, and then another one came and taught about agriculture, and then another one came. These gods that were coming to teach were actually extraterrestrial beings from other planets that have different body shapes than ours. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that everybody looks exactly like us in space, yes? So, they came and they had technology, crystal technology, engineering technology, that they passed on to some of us here on this planet. Mostly, it was in the Lemurian times we're talking about, right? So long, 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 long time ago. And they realized that maybe it was better for humankind to work on their own spiritual identity first, on their own, because they were starting to call themselves God and starting to really get full of themselves. Yeah, and that's one of the interference that happened. Some of these races stayed behind to try and correct the harm they had caused. One of the very important contributor is Sirius in the Pleiades. Am I saying it right? Pleiadians?
Pleiadians.
He provided calendar, he provided astrology, planets information. The drawings are very, in primitive caves were found that they have very clear, detailed knowledge of the movement of planets and where the planets are in the sky at certain times of the year. And they're not supposed to have this kind of knowledge at that time, right? They were described in the Babylonians' scriptures, I guess you call it, or their own mythology, that Sirius, the son of Ra, or the helper of Ra, Ra being the creator, the sun, the great central sun, as having a fish tail, breathing air, but mostly living in water. And they're very, very akin to dolphins. And they're the ones that help materialize dolphins on this planet and help the souls enter the dolphin evolution. Now, to feel that humans are superior beings is actually a newer notion. Back in those times, any evolution on the planet was even. It didn't matter if you had 2 legs or if you had a fish tail. You were all sentient beings evolving, communicating, and growing in your qualities and becoming co-creators. And so they help the dolphins. And interestingly enough, they're also referred to by the dog in Africa and the Uros near Lake Titicaca. So these apparition of these extraterrestrial beings are not just located to one specific area on the planet, but they're all over the planet. So they were interfering in all of the different evolutions. The bird-like hybrids could be either Horus, which was in the Egyptian mythology the son of Isis and Osiris, and had a hawk head and a human body, or the Native American referred to something called the thunderbird, or a very, very, very large bird, bigger than an eagle. And the name for it was, wait for it, it's coming. I have it here. Later. But they came and gave us the gift of having sight and learning from our past and trying to foresee what would happen in the future based on our actions in the present. So it's not like they were fortune tellers looking at orbs or glasses or anything like that. But they were giving us the ability to plan and say, if you want to eat, you best plant now, because you're going to run out of food eventually. And then if you haven't planted the food now, it won't have time to grow in time before the cold comes again, kind of thing, right? So they were able to exist themselves outside of time. And they could understand what would happen in the linear time, and they came to teach us that. Now, the hawk hybrids, meaning that you are part of these beings, and you decide to stay behind and to help the humans evolve, and you became a hawk hybrid, they prefer to be alone. They're loners. They don't like being in big crowds. They don't like spending a lot of time with large groups. They're not socialites. They feel great discomfort in the human body, so they're very uncomfortable in their own skin. They have a hard time understanding their own body, or their body, but they feel too gangly or too short or too small, but they're very what's the name? They drop everything. Clumsy. Yeah, they have a hard time working inside of this body. But they're looking for hunter hybrids. They're looking for different people. think that it's maybe their clumsiness that makes them feel like they don't belong, and so they're looking for other odd people. So that's where you tend to find them in odd groups. So I'm thinking Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, right? They like to be on the fringe of things, more so than any of the other hybrids. So if you are a hawk or horse or bird hybrid, you want to let go of your perfectionist tendencies. And you want to be accepting your limitation as human. Right? You can't just go outside and start flying off. Your wings are not available right now. So yes, you have to walk everywhere, and yes, it makes you sweat, and it makes you disgusting, and it's okay, because that's what it is to be a human. They have remarkable talent. They're extremely gifted, very creative, and they need to love the people who see that in them, because they're awkward, right? So they're very nerdy, and so people tend to ostracize them in a way, but they're okay with it, because they don't like being in a crowd in the first place. But they need to love the people who can accept them with all their quirkiness. Quirkiness is the word I was looking for, and learn that there are many ways to learn. Again, it's their perfectionism. They think that things can be done and can only be done a certain way, and they need to have a bigger, open mind, a broader mind about it. And their difficulty with communicating, they could try telepathy. They'd be very gifted telepathy. And because they usually hang out with other hybrids anyway, they have good chances that other hybrids will actually participate in this experience and actually get to communicate something interesting. Yeah. Now, supervising the Earth, after we got messed up by other races, there's actually been a ring that got put around the planet to protect us from any further interference. And one member of every race had to sit on this council to protect us from interference, and therefore preventing their own people from coming in. They can observe, but they can't touch, right? So for the Star Trek fans, it's the law of non-interfering, right? You can observe, you can't mess around with their evolution anymore. One of those beings was a bee. Yes, it's the ancestors of the bees. And bees hybrid are often very highly sensitive to frequencies of other people. And the little bees that we see now are like the very, 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 very distant cousin of these bees hybrid. That is how their physical form evolved on the planet. But the souls of the originals that entered the human evolution are like bees. They share the same qualities. So they love to sense, they love to taste, they love to, they're the ones that are always, you bring them somewhere and they gotta taste everything, they gotta touch everything. You bring them to a fabric store and they're literally touching everything. But they don't like being touched themselves. Oh, we all know these people. You're like, you have to touch everything, well, stop it. They're gonna think you're gonna steal something. And at the same time, they are overwhelmed by other people contact. So they like touching everything, but being touched is a very big invasion of their space. So if you are a bee hybrid, you have to stop being so offended when people do try to reach out to you or touch you, or when you think you're not being appreciated, because they're very industrious and they work very hard. But something about beehives is that when they get back to the hive, they all touch each other. Right? You did a good job. I went over there. You should see all the flowers, man. You gotta go there. There is a certain appreciation, because then the bees come back. Oh my gosh, he's right, and we don't really have that. And so if they don't have this constant hive of people, to be with and work with and be appreciated by, they flutter. They lose their power to go on. They're naturally round. Okay? Physically, they're rounder people. If you're a bee hybrid, good luck trying to lose the weight. It's your hybrid energy, your frequency to be round. And so it's best accepted. They can see people's soul. They tend to know exactly who people are from what they are. You can't really bullshit a bee. They have this perception, these antennas that are just like their wings, not visible, but they're there, and they're using them constantly without actually knowing what they're actually doing. And so they can see what others can't, and they need to appreciate that. And part of not being part of the hive will bring a sense of loneliness into their lives. And so unless they join a commune, they're going to have to get used to this feeling of not being so connected all the time. And they must learn forgiveness. They're not quick to forgive these people. So they have to learn forgiveness. And it's part of their growing as a being, this experience. Then there's the Pan being, or for the natives called Kopeli. The Pan is usually incarnated in a male body. I've never seen a female Pan. They, just like the myth of Pan, the flute playing, half goat, half human, they're very sexual beings. They love sexuality. But they're not, contrary to what people may think, they're not cheaters, they're not hookers or whatever, escorts. They just really enjoy sexuality. But they're ready to enjoy it with one partner. They don't have a problem with that. They they love music, they love wine, they're very creative. They have, especially their connection to nature is very, very, very strong. They are here to take all this and make it into a spiritual transformation, to help humans, guide humans through their spiritual transformation. They like any of the other hybrids in the human experience, because they're so detached from their hybrid self, they tend to get lost easily. So they might get lost in their sexuality. They might get lost into the pleasure of wine, spirits, or drugs easily. But the spiritual transformation is to pick these things and make it a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with sexuality if it's done appropriately with respect and love and right. So that's what the Pan is trying to do. So if you're a man, Pan, an easy way to be recognized is other men are often threatened by you because you exude this sexuality thing. Women are usually wooed by you really easily. So you have to be very careful that you don't take advantage of that because they're very, very pulled by this sensuality. It's amazing. To be in a Pan's presence is like, you're like, wow, what's going on? It's like those pheromones for bugs, but if they're emanating like this huge cloud of it, you're essentially pulled into it. And it's very interesting if you're immune to it. Like it's your brother, for example, you're immune to it, but you're seeing all these other women flocking to it, and you're like, oh, wow, okay, sure. They can't resist, it's like, it's amazing. So, it's important for them to understand that, because that causes them problems, because these women are so attracted to him, they know how they were attracted to him, so the woman will tend to think, well, are you cheating on me? Is there any other women that are, because, you're so attractive and everything. So it's difficult for them to have a relationship because they're being pulled by their own pheromones and, so they're usually stuck, although they're loyal in a relationship where they're being judged all the time. Like, can't you turn it off? And like, no. That's who they are, right? So, they have very, very strong instincts that they also must learn to trust, and to find the ways to use their gifts and talents, not just have fun all the time. They love fun, and their thing will be, well, no, people are not having enough fun. Yes, I know, but then beyond the fun, what are we heading? Where are we going with this, right? So they also need to be in nature a lot. And that's where they'll find their peace. That's where their spiritual transformation will occur. It will be as a nature temple, not in the city. They don't do well in the city. They get dragged into the big lights and the big sounds, and they get distracted too much. Then we get to the other being that's supervising the protection of humanity, the dragon. The dragons in themselves of great wisdom and a very long life. So they tend to live very long. So and I'm thinking, I'm seeing this old Chinese man with a super long chin beard and but still strong, not needing a cane, but very, very, very wise. And you're thinking, when is that guy going to keel over? And he's buried everything in 3 villages over, and he's still alive and kicking. That's a dragon hybrid, very strong, but not like Van Diesel kind of strong. More this inner strength of strong. So they don't need to be very large, but there's this strength about them. There's power emanating from them that you can feel from a distance. You're like, whoa, I feel that. The dragons came from a different solar system, completely different one, and they're often called to be the judge of other races. In the human evolution, in my book right here, I speak of one of the stories that the dragons were here to do. And they were here to, not so much judge is a big word, I think, but evaluate if someone was ready for more knowledge. Because knowledge itself is a low form of wisdom. You can't just acquire knowledge and know things. You got to know how to use that knowledge. You got to know how to apply the knowledge. You got to know what to do with it. And then that becomes wisdom, right? And so they were there to interview the apprentices stepping forward, saying, I'm ready for more. And if they were, they'd be let pass through. If they weren't, they were sent away. And often they weren't because there was too much greed or too much egotistical tendencies left in the individual that wasn't rid of yet, and they were danger to misuse this knowledge and harm others. So the dragons weren't really breathing fire. It was more that they were speaking fire. In the sense that the truth would burn away all lies. And so you couldn't lie to a dragon. You couldn't bullshit a dragon. And they were very mental beings. And therefore didn't acquire as much love as other evolutionary race. So they work with planets, they work with the ley lines all over the planet, and they're helping with the Kundalini energy of the planet. As the Kundalini is often represented as serpents. Serpents are offspring of and all works together. A dragon hybrid will therefore be wise, have the ability to discern the truth, which in other words, you can't bullshit a dragon. They love sexuality. They have a great gift of healing, and are usually tend to be extremely spiritual. If you are recognizing yourself as a dragon hybrid, therefore, you need to loosen the reins and not be so upset and uptight about control. And don't overreact to personal criticism. That's very hard. Very hard. Like, oh, that's so hard. The most way to do that, the easiest way for them to do that would be to give assistance to others, humbly and freely, and to not misuse their talent to their own advantage, or they'd be great criminals. Like if you'd see, like if you could compare it, it would be the bad guy in Sherlock Holmes, Moriarty, right? Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but always for a nefarious scheme. It's like, come on, you're wasting so much time being evil and bad. There's so much potential at the other end of the spectrum, right? So that's where they need to spend their time and energy, because it's very tempting, knowing that you're powerful implies to just manipulate others. It's so easy, right? And so they must therefore, as they're here to learn about love, learn to say, I'm sorry, I apologize for hurting you, or I don't know the answer. Again, from a very wise being, that's difficult. And then the other one, the El. El are referred to in the Bible as the Elohims. Right? So they were a mix of human and the Elohims are the mix of humans and angels. So the angels are angels. Elves were beings, winged beings from a different solar system. They weren't angels, but they are the Elohim of the Bible. So they had interactions, and they were described as well. So where do I get all this information? Well, there's this lady here who speaks a lot about hybrids. Decoding Your Destiny by Tanis Hellwell, and hybrids, so you think you're human by Tanis Hellwell. But there's also, if you just look and you take the time to search through different mythologies and different creation myths, because you have to go to the very, very beginning of all this, right? It has to be to the very beginning, when they were interfering in their true form, and so were described in their actual form. So the elves were from the Sirius area, and they are beings with free will. And so, you know, as opposed to angels don't have free will, elementals don't have free will, the elves do have free will. And they were learning the use of this will, and then they came to Earth to teach us how to use our own will. And one of these teachers was called El Moria. And that's where he's from. Okay? So, they consciously live in the between 8 to 10 dimensions. And so we live in the 3rd dimension. So they're advanced. They ascended to different levels of being. They are much, much lighter. Their frequency is much, much higher than ours. And to be here in this dimension is very difficult for them. So eventually the easiest way for them to try and help and assist was to become a hybrid. But you have to understand the sacrifice that these beings are making when they're doing that, because they're completely disconnecting every lifetime. It's very hard for them as well, but they're consciously trying to help humanity get back on their feet, to return to being full co-creators and learn, you know, being of love and compassion, not abusing of their powers. Now, if you look at the Earth today, you'll see that there's still a lot of abuse going on. There's still a lot of horrible things going on. We haven't yet succeeded. But I think also, depends on if you're looking at the glass half full or half empty. There's a lot of people doing a lot of goods. There's a lot of people changing. There's a lot of different organizations that are being put forward. There's young children doing incredible things, being, you know, inspired, and having parents giving them the go ahead. Hey, you think you can do it? Sure. And every time the story is, the parents are like, well, never thought he'd take it this far. Right? Their own parents are like shocked to see how these kids are doing these things, and they're 8, 9, 10 years old, and they're thinking, what is this kid going to do when he's 25? The real question is, what are you waiting for? What are you all waiting for to do something magnificent, right? Because we're limiting ourselves. We're learning limits as opposed to these children not seeing the limits yet. And because they don't see the limits, there are no limits. And they achieve and accomplish incredible things. So, if you are an elf, and you living in this incarnation, you have a tendency to think that you're better than others. Because, you know, you come from a higher dimension. You're tracking these things with you. You need to find ways to reframe your opinion, because you can sound pretty condescending. And it's not that your opinion doesn't matter, it's just the way you're delivering is not so smooth. So you need to work on that delivery and develop humility. So I'm not saying that everybody who's full of themselves out there are necessarily a hybrid, but that one is one of the traits to recognize yourself. They're natural leader, and so therefore they need to, with humility, learn to lead with compassion. And to forgive themselves from not being perfect anymore. Because they were pretty perfect in that 8 and 10 dimension. And now they're not so much. So they need to lighten up and play a little bit more. Have a little bit more fun. Leaders have always been important in history. And they have to be very serious. And it was often thought that, because if you looked at, and I'm French, so I'm allowed to take the France for examples, but we were very frivolous and spending a lot of money on dresses and parties and ignoring the people we were supposed to look after, right? The kings. Not that I was there, but I visited the Palace of Versailles, and it was just appalling to see how much money got got poured into this one building when you know that the rest of the country was starving, and you know they had nothing to eat, no place to stay, and the living conditions were horrendous. So then when good kings would come along, they would forego with all the playing and the fun because they were trying to restore some order and try to, and that these leaders became political leaders, or that they became, you know, they're no longer, we still have leaders nowadays making decisions. But they think that if they're having, we have a tendency to judge, oh, he's having a little bit of fun there, so I must be a bad leader. Right? Those people need to lighten up a little bit. They're humans. They work hard. They do a lot to rule these countries. And I personally despise politics because it's a game. And you have to be kind, and you have to shake hands, and you have to make friends, and that's why it's called politics. Otherwise, it would be called a friends gathering. It would be called a party. It's not, right? It's about understanding, you need this, well, I need that, and let's negotiate, and it's deals, and that's what it is. Until we can finally come to a point and realize we're all from one planet, and all the resources belong to everybody, and not just one particular country, and we, instead of fighting on who gets what, we actually find an equal system of distribution to distribute the food and the goods to all of the countries around the world, then there's always going to be those manipulating things, yeah? But they're very good leaders, but they tend to neglect having, they take their role very seriously, but they too need to have a little bit of fun. It's okay. Fun is good. Fun gives you energy to get back to your feet and work at it some more. Now, these other races, there's also other races that used to live amongst us. And this one goes to Kate. Their skin was golden orange and their eyes were a violet color. And they were very tall, nearly 7 feet tall. And they had the long, hers was brown, but they had long blonde hair. And they could communicate telepathically, which made it one of the qualities that they harnessed in this lifetime. And so they tend to have difficulty with words. It tends to be very hard for them to use words to express themselves, and so they usually tend to express things with feelings. And you're like, no, you're talking about feelings. If I describe the scene to me, and they struggle. Well, I would feel happy. Yes, but how do you know you're happy? Well, I would have this bubbly feeling inside. You're like, no, I can't see that. It's all happening inside. But telepathically, they could just send you this feeling, emotion, image, and you would totally understand what they're talking about. So unless they're talking to another telepathic person, these people tend to find that they suck at communicating when they really don't. They're just communicating more still with a telepathic style than a verbal style. Okay? They understood life as a collective and not as an individual. So if harm came to one, harm came to all. If one was hurting, they were whole hurting because it was telepathic, so they could all share these ripple in the ponds together. One person who actually describes these beings, I know one personally, which is kind of cool, but Shirley MacLaine in her book The Camino describes herself as being one of those beings in her whatever past lives. Another one that describes the beings is Tanya Seliwell, and she says that the angels and the elves came with the Atlanteans and Lemurians, and so they were in their form, and that's where the descriptions that are left over in Sumeria and old books and writings that have now been lost because everything sank, but survives in bits and pieces in the stories of creation from the different nations of the world. And one of those races that lived among us was called the Annunaki. The Annunaki were are part of the Sumerian Old Testament, if you will. And they were described as having unacceptable behavior on their own planet, and they got shipped here as a punishment. Thanks. And they arrived in a very primitive craft that, kind of crashed here and couldn't get back. So it was just enough to get here kind of thing. Imagine, right? Tomorrow morning, there's no more gas. It doesn't matter how fancy your car is. Once you run out of gas, you run out of gas. Well, that's pretty much what happened. They just had enough gas to make it here, and they didn't have gas to get back. So we were stuck with them. And they were the ones that most negatively affected us by playing with genetic manipulation and introducing technology to the Atlanteans that they couldn't control. And they influenced things to a point of greed, and so that's what pushed us in a whole different place of our evolution. They really set us back. Now, sometimes there's a big lesson in that. Sometimes, because the world is perfect, the whole universe is perfect. So we can choose to blame them for that, or we can choose to honor that somehow in the greater plan, it benefited us in the very, very, very long run. Maybe not in the short run, but in the very long run, we will be better for it. We'll be the stronger for it. And so that's why it was important to learn these lessons. And so they came to teach us in a way. Unknowingly perhaps, but nonetheless. And so they eventually entered the humanity as hybrids because they couldn't reproduce their bodies. And so, but the soul's trapped here. So it's not like the soul could just get back somewhere else. So they had to correct the karma they created. Remember, this is a karmic board thing. They had to correct their own karma. So everything they created, they have to now come in and do. And a hint for those of you who might be Annunaki. Now, nobody wants to admit that they are, but they're usually very good with electronics, extremely good with computers and everything related to technology, you know. And I'd like to say this. I'm very good with technology, so, but that doesn't necessarily make me an Anunnaki, okay? So there's slight differences, okay? But anyway, you have to release the guilt. They tend to hold on to shame and guilt for a very long time. And you need to start releasing that. You need to start forgiving your own self. They'll forgive others, but they'll have a hard time forgiving anything that they've ever done. And the way to do that is to commit to helping the communities and the world now. It's the best way they can let go of this intrinsic feeling of guilt that they live with all the time. They have to be patient with themselves and develop love and compassion. That was not an innate trait of the Anunnakis to start with. They also need to connect back to Creator. So for them, a strong spiritual practice and meditation is essential. They tend to be atheists. They tend to have rejected it because of the great punishment they received. Right? And it's essential that this time around, in their incarnation, they don't serve their egotistical goals. That's how they detracted us in the first place. Because they could conduct experiments. They did. And appreciate that through all this, they're teaching us. So the resurgence of technology in the human history, which is fairly recent, yeah? It's not been a long time since we've had electricity, telegraph, telephone, and it's exponentially exploded, is because these beings are now served their punishment of non-reincarnating on Earth and are allowed back in, and they're coming back. They're very creative. They're very innovative. And none of the stuff that we think we're learning, we're actually learning. We're just remembering these things. And as they're remembering or making connection, and they can say it was inspired, they can say it was, a lot of the times they say it was by accident I discovered this. Yeah, well, you were tinkering with something that may cause the accident, and, you know, they develop these technologies. But a lot of times, like the previous apparition, they build a plane. This is great. They build a plane. They build cars. They build industries. They build, help me out, the industrial period where they had these big...
Industrial Revolution?
Industrial Revolution, thank you. And so they did all of this because they're facilitating things, making things happen faster, but they didn't think past the present of what's the effect of the pollution. What's the effect of, you know, when they started creating cars, like what? People had one car per block. Now we have 2 cars per family, if not more, if you have more people in your family. They didn't think, okay, but this is negligible. But however, if everybody one day, you know, when computers started coming out, we didn't have one when I grew up, but it was like having a TV, you know. Not everybody had a TV at first, and everybody had one TV, and now people have multiple TVs in their house. Same thing happened with computers. You were lucky if you had one, and then everybody got one, and then they made it so that everybody had to have their own. Like there's no end to how much consumption is created. And what's the effect of the piles of garbage we're creating, right? That's Anunnakis. They create, but they don't think about what's the long-term effect of what you're creating. Yeah? So they have to, that's why they have to return a being of service and be more community-oriented to see what's the effect of what they create. And then we have the mer people. The mer people were just beings that preferred, Lemurians were very attracted to water. So there's a whole section of developmental beings that prefer to be in the water. Mermaids per essence will be, mermaid hybrids per essence will be people who see water and they have to play with it. They see a lake, they gotta go jump in it. And it doesn't matter if it's hot or if it's cold, they gotta swim. They need to be bathing, they need to be swimming, and they'll usually tend to prefer actual water as to a pool. They don't tend to like pools, but they love swimming. But there's something repulsive about being stuck inside of a building. You know, it feels forced to them. So the mer people are extremely sensitive. They were also telepathic beings. So if you were one of the star group that I named before, and then you're entering and helping the human evolution, they tended to go into these other evolution of dolphin and mermaids, which encourage more telepathic communication as opposed to the human on land, which were starting to develop a language, right? And so they were defenders, the mer people. And so if you're a hybrid, you tend to still want to defend people's rights. You tend to want to be the one denouncing injustice of the world. You have to learn to do so in a peaceful way. People tend to trust you, but you don't tend to trust people. It's very interesting. People tell you shit that you never think that, you know, you'd be like, oh my God, you just said that. Okay. But yet you will be fine never sharing anything about yourself. And there has to be an exchange. There has to be a communication. They have to learn forgiveness because they tend to feel betrayal very deeply. They're so sensitive that when they get hurt, they get shattered. And so it's very hard for them to forgive. And so that's an important step for them. I don't know if it's because they used to live underwater or because they're so secretive about themselves, but they tend to hide how skillful they are and talented they are. They tend to downplay. It's below humility. You know, they need to recognize when someone says, "Ooh, that's good," and they say, "Thank you," instead of saying, "Like, no, it's not that good. Look, there's this mistake." So they need to be near water. So they should have a little water fountain, or they should have, you know, always have water around. Yeah? All right. Which leads us to the dolphins. The dolphins are also they were just like the mer people. You have to, again, get out of the idea, but they didn't have 2 legs and 2 arms, it doesn't matter. They were sentient, intelligent beings that have been evolving with humans on this planet since the beginning of time. The dolphins were considered equal citizens to Lemuria, to humans. This is how much our ego has taken us away from respecting all sentient life, right? And in many, many cultures, the Greeks particularly recognized that they were once human, in the sense that they were sentient beings. They always had a tail. They always looked like a fish, but they could communicate, and they were part of discussions, and they were integral members of society. And so, as hybrid, you tend to be very graceful, compassionate, gentle, and very beautiful. If you are of a dolphin hybrid nature, you are a natural healer. And so, you need to learn discernment. You need to learn who, because you're so kind and so loving, you need to learn who's taking advantage of you, who's making fun of you, and who's actually genuine with you. They are very sexual and sensual beings. So they have, just as much as a pan is a very male, the dolphins tend to be very female. But they tend to be very gracious. They love to play. They must live near the water. As opposed to a mermaid, as long as there's water nearby, they'll be fine. The dolphins need the water nearby. So they'll tend to want to live by a lake, a river, the ocean. And they need to learn to relax. Right? Because what do fish have to do? They have to swim constantly. Right? And so they tend to always be busy all the time. And they also pick up discordance in other people, the lack of harmony in person, the lack of balance, and so that affects them. So they need to always spend some time correcting what they absorb during the day by being in contact with others. And the next one is the whale hybrid. The whale hybrid, the reason why the whales are so big is because they have more than one soul in their body. And they evolve as a sense of community. So it's a very different type of evolution. They're intelligent, but they weren't ready to enter as individuals. They wanted to enter as a soul group. So that's what whales were doing for them. If you're a whale, you usually be recognized, you're very large. You tend to be overweight. But they're gifted healers, and they help usually with subconscious stuff. They're very good at discerning a person's inside ideas and thoughts that are blocking them and affecting them negatively. They are very dedicated to helping other people, and they tend to neglect themselves. And although they can read people's inside, they can't communicate well. So again, another very telepathic sort of being. Now you can see a tendency that most hybrids have telepathic talents. So if you're in a group, if you get a chance to think that maybe they're a hybrid, get together and try it out. Try exchanging ideas or images through your mind, and then write it down on paper so you know you're not cheating. And then focus on it and pass the idea and let the person guess. And it's like those old games of wedding games. Like they were asked the same question. No, they asked the same question, and they both have to answer their answer on paper and see if they know each other well, and then they show their answers together. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of the same idea, except that you're exchanging the answer through your mind, but you're writing it down. So if the person says, "Oh, it's a pizza," and you're like, "No, it's cake," right? But there's no cheating. You're not trying to do, "Oh, yeah, it was pizza." Right? But if they guess right, which they're not really guessing, they're actually hearing the answer, then you get all the answers. I've tried this with my children, right? I'm telling them, you guys can talk to me telepathically, as if, I'm like, seriously, we can do this. And like, well, there's no way you can read a mind. I'm like, okay, let's try this. And so we played this game, and it went on for like a good 45 minutes, and then they were totally freaked out. Like they just walked away going, okay, this is crazy. But it's doable, it's feasible, right? And since usually children are born from parents that are also hybrids, you can usually play this with your children. Usually just, it works great. It's fun. Now we get to the elemental part of the talk. Elementals are the ones that are evolving on the planet with us, right? So we have the dolphins, they were evolving in the water, the whales in the water, the mermaids in the water. And on Earth, there's also beings that are evolving. These beings are evolving not so much as the third dimension, but a 3.5 dimension. So they can still interact with us, but they're a little bit out of phase with us. They're a little harder to see, except when it's the full moon, the equinox, the solstice, those times of the year. Just like it's easier to see souls at the time of the dead, which is the 31st to the October 31st, November 1st. At these times, you have the most chance of seeing elementals. Okay? So they're native to the planet. They were sent here to evolve here, but they don't have free will. They were given jobs. They have specific things to do, and they know exactly what they're here for, and that's what they need to do. But just like anything else in the universe, they're meant to get better at it. They're meant to evolve. They're meant to develop. They're just not doing it with free will. They were there, and they were evolving alongside the humans while they were helping us. So a lot of the elementals are working with things like plants, animals, crystals, right? They're working with everything else, helping the earth grow, helping the animals grow, and they were helping us get along with the rest of the planet. And we were meant to work side by side with them. We were meant to see them, we were meant to talk to them, and we were meant to cooperate. And although Ireland is the one that has the most story about them, if you go digging a little bit, there's the old country, as we call it, France, Germany, the Black Forest is full of those stories. They're everywhere as well, and in the Native tradition as well. There were in North America. But the name differs a little bit, but it's in the description of these beings that you can recognize that they're one and the same. For example, you have the Yeti, right? So where's the Yeti from?
North America.
Well, the mountains, the Himalayas, right? But he's described as a very, very tall, kind, very hairy being. Now, do we have anything here, particularly on the West Coast, that would sound something like a Sasquatch, right? But, given that we know about the theory of evolution of Darwin, the same being grown in different areas will adapt to its surrounding. The Sasquatch adapted to living in the forest and has brown hair just like a bear and can easily hide and camouflage himself, as opposed to Yeti would stick out like a sore thumb, so he has developed white hair, right? Like a polar bear did in the North Pole. They're still bears, we agree. They're cousins. They're not the same bears, but they're bears nonetheless. This is the same thing. So these beings are evolving in different areas of the planet, but their evolution is linked to their environment, but they were originally, so many times. The other thing that happens is that living in different places, we have different names for things. Just for energy, for example, the Japanese call it ki, the Chinese call it chi, the Indian call it prana, the natives call it rende, but it's all the same that we're talking about. It's just got a different name. Well, the same happens to these elementals. They have different names in different countries, but if you look at the description of them, then you realize there's not 100 kinds of elementals. There's a very finite number of them. And they each have a very specific, unique beauty. Okay? So now, the elementals were there to help us manifest. They were there to help us take the energy in the air, take the different molecule, and manifest ourselves something that we needed. That was one of their jobs, to co-create with us. Right? It was to teach us these things. Because they're evolving in a different dimension, they can live for 1,000 years. Because they know that you only feel old because you thought you were old in the first place. And so they don't think they're old. They tend to be young looking. That's why you'll never really see an old looking elemental. And And it's only our perspective that some of them look ugly. Because if you take the time to really look at them, at how they blend and how they camouflage and how you can see their true beauty. But we tend to think that sharp teeth is ugly. Because we're judging them by human standards, right? Or that a certain nose is ugly. But again, those are human standards. So if we can get out of our box of human standards and looking at them for who they are all very beautiful. They have a different ethical and moral code. They don't necessarily, especially elves, see the point in staying with someone if they don't love them anymore. And they enjoy free sex because their morale is not guided by a religious system that humans invented. They view and experience things very differently as elementals. And so when these elementals become hybrids, they enter the human evolution, and now all of a sudden they're coerced by all these rules, and they have a really difficult time navigating them all. So usually an elemental hybrid will be drawn to music, art, dancing, poetry, painting. They're also very drawn to altered reality states, so drugs, alcohol, and they love sex. Did I mention that? And they they used to be able to shift their body as much as they wanted to, because they could manifest whatever they wanted to. So being stuck in this human form that all of a sudden gain weight, while all of a sudden is aging, is extremely difficult for them because they know they should be able to look different. They're not quite sure why or how, but they know this. And they're trying to change this by exercising, not eating, or trying to find all these ways to, instead of going more spiritually, how can I accept this, or I can move time back with my ability to now manifest again. Our first hybrid we'll look at, elemental hybrid, is leprechauns. Do we all know what leprechauns look like? Let me hear you say, yay!
Yay! Little green men!
So, leprechauns are the mascot of the Irish, right? So they usually tend to be a little shorter, they have beards, they love to smoke their pipe. It's very stereotypish way to look at it, but it is who they are. They are very stereotyped. They're not as diversified looking ones. However, it'd be simplistic to say they all exactly look the same. It would be like saying all black people look the same, or all, they all, if you get to know them, you can see that this black person is different than black person, right? So it's the same thing with the leprechauns. You get to know them. They all have their own characteristic that differentiates them from one another, but they tend to have a general tendency of looking a certain way. They love humor. They're a great prankster, and they love learning, but they're a great philosopher. All of the hybrids, they would be the philosopher of the hybrids. They are good at business, but they don't like being in the spotlight. They like to be more behind the scene when they're running a business. They won't give up, and they don't tolerate anything that's not on an up and up. They'll call you on it, right? So they're very honest business partner. They're a great business partner to be with. Just hang on a sec. Where did my paper go? Couple hints. Right. Okay then. So for them, if for each of the other hybrids, I mentioned that helpful hints on if you're an elemental. You can identify which hybrid you are, but as an elemental, all the hints culminate into being the same advice for any elemental, because you're all earthbound anyway, you're all from the same dimension anyway, and you're just a different type, but you all need the same hints at the end. So I'll just cover them all up at once. The other one is brownies or gnomes. Now we know what gnomes look like, right? Thanks to Romeo and Juliet. They're very helpful, and they're well liked. They're usually jovial people, rosy cheeks, and it's serious. They have rosy cheeks. Okay, if you learn to know these a little bit well, I found a troll once, and in Sweden, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's a troll. She's a troll, and she's beautiful. She's cute, but she's got a really, really, high, poofy pink cheeks and a rounded nose, and it's just like it's amazing. They fit the description. You can almost see it transparent, just like this image here. If you look at them far enough, you can almost like see the image of the troll, the image of the woman, image of the troll, image of the woman, interchanging each other. It's really cool. But brownies and gnomes are always helping. They love to be around the garden. They always seem to be planting something or taking care of something. And they love looking after people, family, animals. They're keepers. They're keepers of anything. That's their joy. They feel useful. The problem is you need to be making sure that you don't get taken advantage of. Right? You need to look after yourself, and you need to let others sometimes look after you too. But they're great organizers. If you have one of those in your organization, everything's always in top shape, and they know where everything is because they like taking care of things. Right? They don't like to leave things undone. They don't like to procrastinate. They're opposite of procrastinators. They're great to work with, right? Because they're so happy doing it too. So they're not grumpy, like a troll might be. They're just always happy and smiling. They're fun. The pixies or the corrigans, they tend to live in communities when they're at their elemental state. So when they enter the human evolution, they have a really, really hard time. They always feel lonely. They always feel like they're missing something. So they usually like to hang around a group of people, and then they're happy. The problem with that is, as often, it's a gang, or it's not necessarily the right affiliation of people. And so they have to watch who they associate with, that it doesn't bypass their need for judgment, their need for, you understand what I mean? Am I being clear here? Because nobody's nodding heads or anything. I'm feeling a little, give me feedback, people. So in order to not feel this lonely feeling, will associate with people, but their need being so great will sometimes make them associate with people they shouldn't. Okay? Got it. All right. So they have a childlike or very delicate appearance, so they tend to be very tiny. So those are your size 00, size 1, they're tiny, and they eat. So it's not because they're starving themselves. They eat, they enjoy bountiful life, and they just don't gain an ounce, and they're tiny, tiny people. They will say that either they feel like flying or they feel like they're floating. They'll refer to, who's a pixie, right? The little Fée Clochette there and Disney?
Tinkerbell.
Tinkerbell, right? So that's a pixie. Remember, and she's always with her group of pixies. Whenever she's alone, she's in trouble then. So she is supposed to stick around with a group of fairies all the time. That's the fairy. Pixie, sorry. But they love music, they love dancing, they love playing, and they're attracted to children. They're happy around children. And they love the outdoors. They don't like being confined inside. So if they're inside, they have to be in places that are full of glass, so they feel that they're almost like being outside. And they're very independent. And so I know a pixie, and she's very colorful. She's always beautiful, always put together. She's looking at these videos, and she probably is appalled. I don't have makeup, and I'm not wearing a suit. And right? But that's who they are. They love being, and they want to be accepted in the group, so they always look their best. They're fabulous people. Fabulous people. Goblins like to make fun of other people. And they make fun of situations. So they're not very serious people, but they can appear as rude as hybrids in the human evolution. Because you're like, this isn't funny. And it's happened, we all have these moments where something stupid happens, someone goes to sit and there's no chairs, and they just sit anyway, and we all laugh, right? But the goblin would, really laugh, or actually be the one that pulled the chair away just to see what's going to happen, right? That's the goblin for you. But goblin can see through you. So if you're not being authentic, he will call you on it. And he'll have no problem calling it to you in a meeting, in public, or family gathering. He'll call you right there on the spot. Whereas others are more diplomatic, the goblin is
Not so much.
not so much. In the Middle Ages, they were easy to recognize. They were the court jester because they're very good at juggling. They have a great and high coordination. They actually move and think very fast. And nowadays, you can see them in gymnast people. So they don't tend to be extremely tall, but they, as opposed to the other one who feels really gangly in their body and weird and awkward, and they're totally at ease. They master the body very well, and so they have great agility and balance. But they tend to be the one that's going to stick their tongue at you and go, that's the kind of person. So they're difficult to take seriously, which is why they did so well as Jester, right? Because the way they express themselves seems maybe to others very childish. But yet, in your head, you're like, I wish I could do that. I wish I would have said that. That's how you look at them. You'll never say it out loud because you're not going with the convention of society that we live in, and they don't care, right? They'll just call you out on it. They're very authentic. They live very much in the moment. They're nice to be around, but if you want to have a serious conversation with them, you have to warn ahead of time that this is going to be a serious conversation, and they're going to have to not make fun of the situation because they'll take any situation you're presenting to them and they'll make a joke out of it, right? Because they're not taking you or anything seriously. I think that out of all the elementals, they're probably the closest one to know that this isn't real. This is just us learning, and you're taking life way too seriously. They feel unloved and misunderstood, and they're here to develop loyalty, commitment, and kindness. So it's okay to joke, but you can't hurt someone with your joke. It's okay to, and because they're always lack this serious, they have a difficulty creating bonds, lasting bonds, right? People will have them around as a buddy, but they won't have a relationship with them, which is where they need to develop commitment and learn to accept themselves. They have a strong sense of feeling either ugly or disproportionate, which is very interesting. I've known a bunch of people that studied with Cirque du Soleil, right? These people are agile, super strong, can do stuff nobody else can do, and they're complaining because their muscles are sticking out more, and so they feel like they're weird, and I'm thinking, you're beautiful. But they don't see that. They just see themselves as different and bulgy, so that's who they are. And now we go into the elves. Now, the elves are very tall. So if you want to see elves, you watch the movie Lord of the Rings, and they found probably all the living incarnated hybrid elves in the planet to put in this movie. They were literally casting everybody over 6'6". And they all had to be slim, and they all had to be tall, and they all had to be a certain way, yeah? The beauty of the movie is then everybody puts a wig on, and everybody is made to look the same size. But their face tend to be very triangular, so very skinny face. Some of them even sort of look like they have pointy ears. Their eyes are really big eyes, so they allow them to see very well and have great vision. They tend to be attracted to suicide because they don't like aging and they don't like looking old. And elementals have the ability to dissipate if they want to. They can just, if they're done, they're done. And so they're carrying this in the human evolution, and then they can't do that no more because they made a commitment and they have to honor the commitment. And that's one of the hardest things for any of the elemental is carrying their commitment forward. And the elves, there's two types. There's the royal elves and there's the wooden elves. And the royal elves, they're the only one that do well in the city. They're the ones that wear the jewelry, they wear the fancy dress. Now, think, can you name me someone who could be a royal elf? Think actress. They love to be actors because they love being on the screen, they love to be acclaimed, they love to be...
Elizabeth Taylor.
Huh?
Elizabeth Taylor.
Nope. No, I was thinking much more recent. Nicole Kidman.
Oh.
Oh.
Yes. Long hair. She's always got this perfect posture.
Regal.
Very regal. Man, she walks on the carpet and she takes the whole carpet, right? Everybody else can go by, but her, she just captures the attention. That's a royal elf. That's what they look like. They're beautiful, charismatic, tall, slender, classic looking, perfect skin, milky skin like hers. I don't know if she does it. She lives in Australia. You think she'd be burnt by now, but no, she's got perfect skin. And also they have a very androgynous quality like. So I don't know her name, but the actress that does the in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Yes.
the Queen of Ice,
Oh.
the enemy of the Lion.
Kate,
Blanchett Winslet?
No. Anyway, she. Sometimes I'm seeing her and I'm like, is she a woman or is she a man? She has this complete androgyny, very, very pointy face. She's also in the movie with Keanu Reeves. She's an angel.
Matrix.
No, not the Matrix. The one with.
Constantine.
Yeah, Constantine. Yes, exactly. Do you know her name? Her name escapes me. She's a really good actress. Yeah, you look it up. I don't know. No.
no.
You'll figure it out. We'll come back to her. But she has this big eyes, right? She has this very, very pointy face, but she has short hair, but she's so tall. You're like, there's a point where I thought she was a guy, and then she started talking. I'm like, is she a girl? And I can't tell. So that's a royal elf quality. They're very distinguished. They stand out. As opposed to a forest elf, who's also carries the same quality of their royal. So tall, slender, pointy face, big eyes, but they don't like the limelight. They prefer the earthy tones, dressing very down to earth. They like being on their own, spending time in nature. One of the two male actors that are forest elves is the guy that does the Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp, and Keanu Reeves. Those two are forest elves. And if you look at their face, if you look at their eyes, if you look at their, they never gain an ounce of weight. They always seem to have this flawless skin. They don't seem to age. Yes?
Oh, the actress.
Yes.
She played Gabriel. Tilda Swinton.
Yes.
Tilda Swinton. There you go. So that's another example of a royal elf.
Curious of another one. Has anyone heard of Gwendolyn
Yes.
Christie?
Yeah. So, but they enjoy the careers because there's a part of them that likes to be able to camouflage themselves through the acting, right? So, but they get to play. They love playing, and so yeah. Now we get to the troll hybrid. The troll hybrid is they're either like you or they don't. They're pretty direct. Yes, I know. Yeah. Time is flying. They observe, but they don't tend to stay much. Right? They seem or appear to be grouchy. And when they communicate, they will usually start by complaining first. So think of someone that you know, that every time you ask something, it's always a complaint. And you're like, my gosh, it's not that bad. Very grumpy. Because of that, they tend to be loners. Now, that's the catch-22, right? Is the chicken and the egg. Are they loners because they're grouchy, or are they grouchy and then they become loners, right? But it's really a catch-22. They are great protectors, however. They are dedicated to someone they love. Once they love someone, and once you get past the grouchy, because you can, and appreciate that that's just how they express themselves, and you help them, right? That's the whole point. They help you, you help them. That's the whole nature of this hybrid incarnation, is to help each other grow. They help the humans by protecting them, guiding them, and being great guardians. But in exchange, you teach them how to be more happy, more optimistic, more communicating. They are physically tall, broad shoulders, usually very strong physically, and I mean, I was a policewoman for 19 years. I've dealt with a lot of bikers, okay? And I'd say a lot of them are troll hybrids. And they tend to be the most gentle souls, the kindest people. They just put on a really rough exterior because you're not going to mess with me, right? But they're kind. They're very, and you know, if they like you, which was great for me in my job, because if they liked me, nobody messed with me. It's like, she's a cool cop, don't mess around with her. So it's like a great weekend ahead, yay. Right? If you know how to befriend them. And I was being authentic. You can't be nothing but authentic with the trolls. But I was authentic. I would approach them, be kind to them, and treat them like any other human being, and get past the gruff exterior and accept them for who they are. And then, my gosh, once you've been accepted by these people, these troll hybrids, you're in for life. You're in for life. This is just, they're great hybrids. But they have to learn to trust others and to learn to forgive the people that were not good to you. So there's a trend here, right? There's a lot about forgiveness, a lot about trust, and it goes back to they were out of a job because we stopped working with them. They were out of the job because we stopped communicating and working with them. They lost trust in humanity. And so it's more than just one person they need to trust again. It's humanity they need to trust. So usually their struggle is very real and very big. Yeah? So a helpful hint for the any of the elementals I just named is that they have to be careful of the substances. They tend to be the seekers of altered senses, altered reality, because they know there's another one. There's a part of them that knows it. So you have to, I'm not saying it's not there, the appeal's not there, I'm just saying you have to learn to do that without the help of drugs and alcohol, right? It's doable. You just got to learn how. But be very careful because they get addicted really easy. It's always easier for them if they can live either close to nature or in the country. Except the royal elves. Royal elves do fun. But that's the only kind of elementals that does well in the city. All the other ones need to be close to nature. They have an urge not to conform. I kind of like it. Because otherwise, what a boring society would we live in? You know, everybody would dress the same, everybody would look the same, everybody would have the same haircut. It's because of them that we have the purple hair and we have the half-shaved head, and it's fun. It's because of them that we can wear yoga pants, jeans, skirts, and whatever else you name it. It's because of them that we can wear any color that we want. They're the ones that have brought that to us, right? So it's good. They just got to be careful they don't take it too far and then get in trouble, right? They have to watch for commitment issue. A lot of them, they're very sensual beings. They're loving having a body because they're feeling things they couldn't feel before they had one. And so they tend to enjoy the extramarital affair and the sex on the side. So they have to really own their commitment to be having these things, but with one relationship or within the consensual, you know, not hurting others. It has to be, you know. The best career for them is that has anything to do with helping the environment or working with the community, helping people, you know, like anything that is selfish, solely oriented toward themselves, they will not find happiness there. They have to learn to love and to use their free will appropriately, because they're learning to use them. And hybrids have not had it for as long as humans have. So they're the ones who tend to, right? They're usually great because they look beautiful. They're very attractive. And they're the ones that can drag you or a bunch of your friends into doing things that if you had just for a minute used your head, you would have never, you're like, what was I thinking? Well, you weren't, And that's where you can misuse your free will, right? They have a way of hypnotizing you and enticing you into doing things that you might not, should not, or, gone there. And then, last but not least, we're finishing off with the inner earth beings. The inner earth beings, there's two types of inner earth beings. The first type is, remember at the very beginning of the talk, see, I like to round the talks in a big circle. At the very beginning of the talk, I talked about the earth being a gaseous form, yeah? And so there were some beings that wanted to continue evolving with these bodies and didn't want the denser bodies because they didn't want to be completely disconnected from God. So these are referred to in different bibliography as hyperboreans. And so what they did when the planet started to solidify and the mist of the planet started to disappear, they went inside the earth to live there. And they continued evolving there. Now we're talking 400,000 years of evolution. Okay? In the book of Editorfa by John Uri Lord, published in 1895, it's basically he met these people and he was allowed inside the earth and he brought back what they do and how they live. Then we have Wells, who wrote Journey into the Center of the Earth. And we're thinking, oh, well, it's all science fiction, and maybe not so much. Okay? He, too, was able to write that there's access from the surface of the planet to go inside into places where life does exist and grows. It's warm inside the planet. It's not light, but it's warm. And most forms of life that it is deep in the ocean or deep inside the earth tend to develop a phosphorescence about their body that they're not in the dark. And this is documented, right? So there's life inside the planet. This inner earth being use telepathy, levitation, and they can move through time and space, which is really interesting because Wells also wrote a book about time travel. Right? Once you get to know some people, and then the stories is way, way, way too far out, Wells decided to write a few books and present them as fantasy stories. And he became one of their greatest writers. Wells is amazing. But what he's writing about, some of the stuff is real. And he was one of the people that could see them and hear them and channel them. Now, interestingly enough, recently in our day and age, because that's still 1895 and Wells is quite a ways back, we have a lady, a Canadian lady, Aurelia Louise Jones, who wrote about Telos people who live inside Mount Shasta in the fifth dimension. These were beings that survived. They're not as old as the Hyperboreans. Hyperboreans were before Lemuria, but these were Lemurians who, when the Great Cataclysm happened, escaped and were able to make it to mainland, but went inside the mountain because everything got flooded. And they decided to stay inside the mountain and evolve there. And they're in charge of the crystals as well as the Hyperboreans. So they all have the same function. Now that they're living inside the planet, they're taking care of the inner core of the planet. The crystal ley lines and the mineral kingdom and everything that relates to the energies, aligning of the energies of the planet. Sometimes some of them will show up to the surface and take the form of teachers to try and bring awareness back to the humans, right? So they're not completely abandoned us. They've been found in the fourth dimension, in the Andes, in the Himalayas, India, and Nepal. And they're usually described pretty much as albinos. very close to albinos. But albinos have red eyes, whereas if they're in the earth, they will have black eyes or they'll be blind. Or they'll usually walk around their eyes closed because the light of the sun is too bright. So they'll usually they'll just say they're blind and they'll just wear something over their eyes. But they're usually got very white skin, very pale skin. They're hairless and they have larger body size in the sense that they're taller than us, but they're not large, they're skinny. So they're tall but skinny. And a hybrid of the inner earth will be the albino. So there's very few of them. But they are there. There are some. Yeah. So an inner earth hybrid, the tips is that they tend to withdraw and be hermit. Right? Well, don't blame them. They don't usually get treated very well. But they need to practice compassion. They tend to be very judgmental with the way that we treat the earth. They tend to be very upset at pollution. They need to practice humility. They tend to think that they know better. And they need to have some fun, develop a sense of humor, and recognize their value in their contribution to this planet and to the human evolution. And be grateful for their talents and wisdom. And so, these are but a few of the hybrid's possibility. And if you've been called to listen to this or to come to me, you're most likely a hybrid yourself. Otherwise, you would not be here. This would be a complete waste of time for them. And the universe would not do that. If you want to know what to do next, the idea is not just to know that you're hybrid. Knowing that you're hybrid is kind of the first step. Then you have to really get to know the hybrid. And then you need to integrate that hybrid to your actual human self and become one. Meaning that you completely accept that you're having a human experience, but you completely accept that you're just a little bit different than the rest. And therefore your lesson might be just a little bit different, and that you might have to do things a little bit differently. You can be challenged because you're a hybrid. But your role, I can't say this much enough, your role as a hybrid is that you must help humanity in one form or another. That you're cleaning the parks and you're becoming an example that way, that you're taking care of young children and showing them a better way, that you help people through their spiritual transformation or guide them to meditate more. Your purpose is much, much more than yourself. And you need to stop looking at your umbilical, what is it?
Cord?
No.
No.
What was there? What's there now? What's the name of
The belly
belly
button.
button?
Belly
Ah,
button,
you
yeah.
have to stop staring at your belly button and start looking up around you and saying, okay, this is me, and I'm actually good for this world. I'm here to have a great purpose. And I think that's the hardest for any hybrid, is to recognize their greater purpose. They often fight their greater purpose because they feel so different and they feel they don't belong. They feel they'll be rejected, and that's why they don't get out of their little hole. And that's what you're here to learn. That's your greatest lesson, getting out of the hole, appreciating everything that you are, mastering everything that you are, and then sharing it with the world. And those who accept you, and those who don't. And that should not be a judgment on how good or bad you are, just as how open they are. And when they're open enough, they might actually change their mind and opinion about you. So the opinion of others should not matter in the purpose that you're fulfilling on this planet. You have to be grand. You have to shine. You have to take that place in the world, because that's why you're here. That's part of the role that you came to fulfill. If you want to know how hard that is and how long that may take, I encourage you to buy my book. All 300 pages of it will tell you it's been a long journey. But even doing free talks like this and doing the free videos and this is me giving back for freely and humbly what I've learned, what I know, to encourage you to open your mind and open the mind of everybody watching. Now, it's easy enough for people to judge. I mean, I don't know what the comments are going to say on YouTube and Facebook and whatever else, but it doesn't matter anymore. Because I have to help all the other ones that are trying to find themselves and are searching and are not finding the answers. And so together, we can all do that. Now, this concludes the series, the first series of 6 presentations. There will be another series of 6.
Mhm.
Yay!
Yay.
In a few weeks. 'Cause
And
I need a vacation.
and for the English-speaking people,
Yes,
Your
well,
Eng-
this is the book for French, right? Because we had a big contest we were trying to enter and win, so we released the French this week. The English will be available in just give me a few days. But I am flying and other things are getting in the way, so and I need a little bit of rest. So I will honor myself and take a little bit of rest, but we will be back for the second series, and you'll find out about the series on the newsletter. So if you haven't signed for the newsletter, now's a good time to do so. And there'll be podcast, YouTube, and Facebook Live when we start getting them done. They'll be in English, and then, yes, for the French-speaking people, there will be French as well. So we are trying to cater to all the markets, all the way to Europe, to South America. But no habla español, no sé. Nope, that's not happening. Okay, so let me check. We have time for questions. So, everybody was so good, nobody got up while in front of the camera.
Yeah.
So, now's your time, you have the floor. Do you have any questions? People on YouTube and Facebook, now's the time. If you have questions, type them up. And my assistant, Chris, behind the camera is going to be looking and trying to catch all these comments.
So can you be a combination hybrid?
Yes.
A double
Yeah.
hybrid, yeah.
Yeah, because if you're originally a star being, then yes, because you started as a star being, and then as you entered the evolution, then you were circulating freely, helping all forms of evolution being, sentient being, and then eventually now,
Can you be more than 2, or can you be a mix of 4? Or,
usually not.
Okay.
Never seen that many.
Is there any way that you can identify for us in a personal reading which hybrid we are?
We can have fun with that, sure.
Absolutely, you can.
Well, yes, but.
Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Are you able to identify with your own psychic development? Are you able to pick that energy up on people when you
Oh,
meet
totally.
them?
Totally.
So you could actually literally go around this room and tell us what you think are.
No pressure.
No pressure. Just asking.
Yeah, no, I could. But when I'm doing the presentations like this, I kind of close off that bit because otherwise it's too distracting.
Yes.
I have the ability. I'm an hybrid, right? So I have the ability to actually be in this dimension and the other dimension at the same time. This is an ability you can develop. So when you first start to meditate, people close their eyes to get visions. Right? Eventually, I could get the visions with my eyes open. But not just when I meditate. When I'm driving, when I'm walking, when I'm talking to people. Like I said, I met this person in Sweden, and it's like, oh, troll person, and I'm like, shit, okay, stop. And it takes a second for me to. It eventually starts looking like this. So I get the mixture of both, right? And so that's how I see people. So when people are asking me, because I'm an artist, and they're like, oh, would you draw me? And I'm like, oh, not so sure. Do you want to give me a picture? Because then I can draw the picture, right? Because that's all I see. I just see the physical part. But if you're actually asking me on the fly, can you draw me? Then I will draw you energetically. So you look very different. I've had some very young people look very old. And they were like, well, that's we see? I said, yeah, I see. And of course people right away with their human judgment, I'm old, oh my gosh. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I see this very old soul that's very wise. and that is carrying this ancient wisdom. So the way I see people doesn't always translate to the human judgment that you guys have when you look at yourself in the mirror. But if I see someone that's very sick, they'll usually come in and I'll see things that if I take a picture and look at the picture, I'm going to say, no, they didn't look like that. To the point that sometimes I don't even recognize the picture. They look so different. But as I'm starting working with their energy and I'm starting working with whatever is blocked and circulating it, then I can start seeing the rosy cheeks and I can start seeing colors and some of them actually look like the living dead when they come out.
So it's superimposed on
Yeah,
the person?
just like that, yeah. You can, after we are done videotaping, you guys can just go see it on Amazon and you can, zoom in on the cover. But you can have a look at it, and that's exactly what people look like to me. So I don't see people the way you may see people. So I see, when I look at your body, I also see all the blockages. I also see all the karmic links. I also see if there's anything past life attached to you. I see all of that. So when people come to me, I see much more than right here, right now. I'm seeing pretty much everything that you ever been, ever was. So when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at you from that perspective of the whole being that you are and not just who you are right now. So it makes life interesting sometimes. So there are times when I'm at a fair or giving a public talk and I'm on a stage, I could fall off. So I have to turn it off and just focus on the talk. Like right now, there's way too many electronics, too many lights, it's too hard. It actually, at one point I said they're sensitive to
The light.
the light, and the worst thing you can do to me is put me in a building with all the
Fluorescent.
fluorescent. Then I'm in pain. It feels like there's a siren going off in my head. I can feel the electricity, statics, and stuff moving across a room. I'm very, very, very sensitive. So I need and right now, you guys can't see this, but we're in not a very big space and quite a few people, so I have to close it off. Otherwise, every time you have an emotion, I feel that emotion like a tsunami inside of me, right? So it becomes too much and overwhelming. When I'm teaching, the only level that I teach without that is master teacher level. And you can ask my students, it's a very different class. Because I feel everything. But I allow that to show them what is it truly feels like to be teaching and, doing that stuff.
Yeah.
For the rest of the time, this is me closed. It feels very different, doesn't it, than when I was open.
Yeah.
Yeah. So open and closed. Now you know the difference.
Are there any hybrids is it a hybrid characteristic, or is there a type of hybrid that's very sensitive to their environment in terms of alcohol and smells and
All of them.
All of them. I'm the person who like this much wine and I can feel it. Smoke. Somebody could be smoking, the other corner and I can smell it. Those sorts of kinds of sensitive, ultra sensitive to medication, aspirin, to anything.
Yeah. All of them are extremely reactive. That's why it's so easy for them to get so addicted. Because it doesn't take much for them to feel the buzz and.
So all hybrid people are like that, just sensitive to environmental contaminants even too.
Yeah. Yes, because they're not used to that physicality of the body, right? Because if you give me your hand, right? So I'm touching your hand, right? But if you've never had this feeling before, just this touch may, awaken things inside of you, and then you go, ooh, and then you're like, wow. Well, hang on a second, and then it doesn't take much for them to be stimulated and to overwhelmed by the very simple and basic of touch or the words. Talking is why so many of them have a hard time talking. Well, first of all, most of them are telepathic originally, but the other way is that they take things very literally. It's very literal in their world. So if someone yells, 3-year-old says, "I hate you," and runs off to their room, they're completely overwhelmed. They think that they need to report themselves to the social services because they've been terrible parents. That they take things to extreme because they feel to extreme because that's who they are. See, if you can understand these things about yourself, then you can understand when you're in a relationship with somebody and somebody says something to you, how much what they're saying, it comes straight to your heart and gets you right away. Because everything they say is taken so seriously. There's almost no room for, or leeway for buffering. Whereas just a human just goes like, I don't know how many times just grow a thicker skin. Like seriously. Just be kind. That would be, that would kind of solve my problem. But they don't see how, and we don't tend to show it either. That's our protection. That's our armor that we put forward because these things endure so much and they hurt us so much, so easily and so profoundly. Then we build these walls and these armor around us, preventing us from being hurt again. Right? And then we don't communicate well, and then we ostracize ourselves. And you see how it's, but if you now know who you are, and you know why you're this way, and you don't need to grow a thicker skin, you can just say, these words actually hurt me. When I actually started saying this to people, when you say this is what it does to me. And they went like, oh, well, it never took you for, whatever, sissy, or whatever they call you. And I'm like, well, that is how it affects me. So could you be kinder or watch what you're saying or how you're saying it? Because I cannot be the only one on this planet that you hurt by talking to this way. Right? But I have to make myself vulnerable. I have to be the one to go on stage and say, hi, my name is Sonia. I'm a hybrid. Please treat me with kind care, please.
Yeah, don't break me.
Don't break me, yeah. But that vulnerability required a lot of courage, a lot of strength. That I didn't have when I was younger. So again, don't beat yourself up if you don't have it yet. That's cool. But it comes. It's available. It's possible. Yes.
I think a lot of people too in the human race, like when we had our course, we were told about the armor that you carry. You've got this mesh harness that you wear underneath all your stuff that protects you from everything that comes in. But I think it's a good lesson to learn is to take that off and be vulnerable, because then you find out who you truly are.
Well, that's the point. Is one of the idea in the book, and following this book is going to be a workbook, which is really the true gift that comes from this. Is the workbook then tells you, okay, so do you really want to be you and to be the best you can be, and to be the most comfortable you can be with your own skin and who you are? And then it tells you, first of all, the first thing you have to do is look at your life. Look at everything that happened.
Yeah. And
how did you build this shell or this armor or this castle around you? How did this happen? And it didn't just happen overnight, but it happened here and then got reinforced there and reinforced again, and now something else happened and that hurt in a different way. And then you realize I don't need just a shield, I need a hat, I need a cape, and and so it builds up. And the older you are, well, the more bad habits or the more protection you have, or whatever you want to call these things, right? To avoid being you, to protect you, is what you're saying to yourself, but you're sabotaging your own human experience while you're on the planet. Because you're here to be you, you're here to be authentic, and you're here because you have a job to do. And now, as hybrids, you know what your job is to help humanity be kinder, more loving, more compassionate.
I'm sure that's why people are so overindulgent with buying things. I need to have this because it's going to make me feel better inside.
Yeah.
The more stuff I have, the happier I am. But they never find the happiness because it's not about the stuff.
Oh, no. And the emptiness inside is real. But it's not stuff that's going to fill that.
No.
Yes, dear.
The hybrid that came and crashed landed, I can't remember the name.
Annunaki.
How do you help them?
referring to my personal experience. You are very kind to them. And when they're not, you gently remind them there's a better way of addressing the situation or talking to someone. Or that perhaps they're overreacting. Or
Guilt. It's the guilt that I'm having trouble with. Not me, but
no,
the
yeah.
guilt.
Well, the same way. I find the best way to help them is to give them a purpose. Is to give them a sense of how are they going to course correct things. So they may feel guilty because of something they've done, but there's nothing that can't be atoned for.
Like being alive because of your footprint on this earth is destroying it.
You see, your footprint doesn't have to destroy the planet. So you learn to make different choices. You learn to you can educate others first of all, and you have to be a role model. So it's really truly how you feel. I know people that are living on South Spring Island and Main Island, and they're living without electricity, and they're living without running water, and they're cultivating their own food, and they're limiting their footprint on the planet as much as they can.
Oh.
So you can't take it to that because they have. If their guilt was great enough that that's what they need to do to be able to continue living on the planet and be okay with it. And so it's all a matter of choices. And if they feel they have a lot to atone for, it might be the solution they're looking for. Yeah.
I'll work on that one.
Yeah. So, anybody else has questions? You were so quiet tonight. Is there anything I can answer for you?
No.
You good? Okay. Anybody else?
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. If you guys was your first night, I encourage you to go see the other ones.
We live really close by, so.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Cool, cool. You're welcome. Okay. Good night, everyone, and go on the newsletter to know when the next series of talks is going to happen.
Yay!